yeah, welcome everyone. This is the PPL and Women in Control board program. This is our third session, and today we're going to be talking about confidence, imposter syndrome, and shattering the glass slipper and exploring jobs that aren't for us. This is our third session from our joint board development program with PPL. In our first session in August, we talked about demystifying the board. So we looked at, what does even being on a board mean? The process to kind of getting on a board. We heard from some incredible, inspiring women that hold board positions who gave us their insights and tips into how they got their positions. In our last session at the end of September, we had special guest Marianne Seagart, who's the author of The Authority Gap, and she spoke to us all about how women in senior roles and authority roles are still taken less seriously than men. And today's session, we're going to be exploring and talking about all things around confidence and imposter syndrome. So, maybe you have rarely see people like yourself in senior roles, or you've ever wanted to take your career to that next level and you've not felt quite right. So we're here with our special guest, Professor Samantha Warren. Welcome. Thank you.
Hi.
Samantha Warren is a professor and research lead in the Department of Organisation Studies and Human Resource Management at the University of Portsmouth. And Sam is also the founder of the In the Key of the She project, which she's going to tell us a little bit about. And she's also the co-chair of the Association for Electronic Music. So Professor Samantha Warren, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me onto this amazing series. I'm absolutely over the moon to be here. First of all, I should say that although we're talking about confidence and imposter syndrome, it might well not be in the way that you're expecting us to be talking about it, because I want to blow apart some of these stereotypes and reframe some damaging thinking. The purpose of today this evening if you're in the UK, is to help aspiring women to feel more like they belong as they are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So lots to get into. But before that, just tell us a little bit about, you and your background. How come a business school professor has kind of ended up in the music industry, and tell us a little bit about In the Key of the She project and your research there as well.
Yeah, sure. It's a very, very good question, and one that I would never have known I'd been here 10 years ago. I started interviewing DJs about 7 years ago now, because I've always been interested in forms of work which are perhaps more unusual and certainly are jobs that we don't normally think of as jobs. So I've been a big time raver for many years, and I thought it was a fascinating area of work, and what a career to be a DJ, particularly underground DJs. And I was really interested in all the free labor that goes into the scene, and what's work, what's not work, what's fun, blurring of the boundaries, how it all worked. So that's where I started, and very quickly realized that I was only interviewing men. I also learned that in modern day DJing, especially digital DJing, you really have to produce your own music if you want to be taken seriously. So you have to be a DJ stroke producer or producer stroke DJ. And it seemed at the time, this was going back about 3 or 4 years ago, that the men were doing this in enormous numbers, but women seemed to be less visible doing it. I mean, at the time, I thought that there were just no women producers. How wrong could I be? So I decided to start interviewing women and gender minorities who were producing electronic music across all the genres, and find out what their success strategies were, what the challenges were that they faced from a career point of view. So that's basically, I got funded by the Leverhulme Trust to do this research for the last couple of years. So I've been absolutely happy as Larry doing that for a couple of years, and I've done about 60 interviews with some absolutely fantastic producers, and learned an awful lot about the music industry in the meantime. So that's how I got here.
Okay, fantastic. Just a quick note as well. Eugenie's asked if we can access the other sessions. I will send them out with a recording of today's session tomorrow. And just a reminder to put your questions as we go along in the Q&A panel. And if you want to interact with anybody in the chat, make sure you're clicking all panelists and attendees. Right, so Sam, let's talk about the session today. So we're talking about confidence, imposter syndrome, jobs that aren't for us, and shattering the glass slipper. So do you want to explain a little bit about what we're going to be doing in the session today?
Yeah, I mean, what I'm going to be doing is giving you some research findings, and from my own research, from research that I've been doing with the Association for Electronic Music, and also some current thinking on why we should stop talking about imposter syndrome. I'm going to say briefly a little bit about what imposter syndrome has been defined as, so that we know what we're stopping talking about, if that makes sense. It was originally a phrase, it was imposter, it wasn't imposter syndrome, it was imposter phenomenon, I believe, was the original phrase. And it was Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes in 1978, so quite some time ago. And there were 3 elements to this concept. And the first one was not believing that you deserve the success that you have achieved. Number 2 is a feeling of fraud about that success, that you're somehow not you cheated somehow, or you're not really, you're a fraud, you shouldn't be there. And then the third one, which is perhaps the one I resonate with most, is this feeling of dread that you're going to get found out. And the researchers set about trying to examine this phenomenon. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about a lot of the surrounding context to that research that's got missed and got lost along the way as people have latched onto this idea of imposter syndrome. I'll talk about the glass slipper in a little while, but one of the things that we want to do today is to draw in as many of our wonderful attendees' experiences as we can in this very short space of time. So I set up a board called a Padlet, which, as you can see, everybody, Nadia has very helpfully posted in the chat. All you need to do, Padlet is a wonderful thing. All you need to do is click on that link and it will take you to a board where you just post a little sticky and you can share what you want. It's totally anonymous. And what we'd like you to do is to share your experiences of any examples of how you have felt as if you've been an imposter in your workplace during your career. You'll see there's quite a lot of things on there already, some very powerful and touching, really quite touching statements that we were looking at earlier on. So later on, we're going to have a look at the Padlet and share it with everybody, and sort of discuss some of the things that you've been contributing. But I guess the message for today is pretty simple, really, is that we need to stop beating ourselves up about these things.
Definitely. So yeah, as Sam said, please go and kind of submit anything that you want to anonymously on the Padlet, and we're going to come to that after we do this next section. So do you want to open and share your screen and open your slides up?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about what the glass slipper concept is and why it might be helpful. Hopefully everyone can see that. Okay, can you see that, Nadia? Yep.
Yeah, we've got that. Okay. Yeah. So you're going to explain a little bit more about the glass slipper concept and also how it's relevant to senior positions in the music industry, which is what this kind of board development program is all kind of relating to.
Yeah, I mean, it's a concept that actually is relevant to any occupational identity. And it was something that I came across relatively recently in writing up a paper based on the In the Key of She research. And it comes from the work of Karen Ashcraft, who is a very eminent professor, and she wrote about this in about 2013, and she's been developing it ever since. And the idea is that it's a rather nice metaphor or way of understanding or analysing why some roles sort of seem to just naturally fit some people, or should I say groups of people, and not others. Ooh. A moment. Why am I not? Hang on just a moment. That's better. The way that Karen Ashcraft describes it is, this is rather fancy, but it's a great way of describing it, really. A collective associative conception of occupational identity. So what does that actually mean? It means that the ideas we have about jobs, or certain jobs, are formed in the image of those who have the power to first define and gatekeep them. So the idea that the very first holders of these roles and the people who traditionally have occupied those roles actually have the power to define elements of that role, which effectively keeps other people out. And I'll say a little bit more about that on the next slide. Because what happens is that the identity of the work, so for example, a senior leader, gets naturalized over time. So certain things that we think a leader does, like be hard-headed, rational, cool, cool-nosed, I was going to say then. It's actually hard-nosed and cool-headed, isn't it? But very determined, firm, detached, all of those things that sort of traditionally we would associate with, if we were to write down words associated with leadership, have actually become naturalized so that leadership equates to that, those sorts of characteristics, when actually they just happened to be the characteristics of the people who were the first leaders or in positions of power in the dominant group. And there's also another element to this, which I really like, which is that there are also inherent assumptions about what the correct role holder looks like. So there's some very powerful research which has been done that shows that by the age of 7, our gender stereotypes about occupational gender stereotypes in kids are fixed by the age of 7. So if you ask children to draw a firefighter, they will draw a man. And if you ask them to draw a manager, they will draw a man, and a white one at that generally. So these embodied characteristics mean that not only do you behave in a certain way for a particular role, but we expect that you look a certain way as well. And the next thing that comes from that is that the identity of the workers who end up doing those roles actually come to define the role, but they've actually got nothing to do with the work itself. So for example, a tall, white, middle-aged man is the archetypal leader stereotype that pops into most people's heads when they're asked. It's actually got nothing to do with the job of leading. So I'm going to just share some statistics from some of the research that I've been doing that supports the way that some of this is experienced by people in these kinds of positions. The first one is from the Association for Electronic Music's Gender Diversity in Electronic Music survey, which we carried out at the end of 2019-2020. The report is imminently to be published. And we found that 49% of the women who replied to the survey felt their work was taken seriously. So less than half against 72% of men. So what happens with that is that you don't fit that role, you don't feel you fit that role, and you don't feel your work is taken seriously because you don't look the part. The glass slipper doesn't fit you. 71% of the women who identified as a minority in the survey felt like they had to act like one of the boys to fit in. In the key of she data, this is electronic music producers rather than back office or behind the scenes music industry roles. But this list here, I think, is probably instantly recognizable to a lot of people in a lot of roles. Your skills are not recognized and they're doubted because of who you are, what you look like. I had people, DJs, telling me they were refused entry to the stage and to clubs. I've had DJs saying they're told, don't dance too much, you won't be taken seriously, don't look too pretty, don't wear any makeup. And a lot of the strategies that certainly were recounted to me in the interviews by producers were quite violent in a way, quite harsh. People deliberately trying to look androgynous or like a man in order to just be taken more seriously for their job. People that were mistaken for secretaries, not that there's anything wrong with being a secretary, but when you're the course leader of a music technology school, it's frustrating. And even the term female producer just assumes that this glass slipper is male. And why glass as a metaphor? Well, it gives the illusion of not being there. I know you can see on the screen here, I've got a picture of glass slippers we can see, but the idea, if you've got really clean glass, is that there's nothing there. It's an illusion. We can see straight through it. So others say, well, I don't know what you're talking about. There's nothing here, but experientially, it's a solid barrier. However, if you shatter glass, you can get hurt, which means that we're often very afraid to try and break it. And it's been used in lots of different ways in diversity research. I expect everyone here is familiar with the glass ceiling, but there's also the glass elevator and the glass cliff, which I don't have time to go into now, but it's a very powerful metaphor, I think, for understanding some of these things. So to sum that up, there's an illusion that, sure, anyone can do this role. Really, come on in, we welcome you, we want to have you. But in reality, there's actually an invisible mold that means that roles only actually fit certain people and not others. And the rest of us get labeled as imposters.
Definitely. And I can relate to so much of that you've just kind of gone through, going back to your first slide, talking about kind of the AFEM research and also kind of those, you're only in the key of the she research as well. And obviously, even myself being a manager in the industry, I have been refused entry into clubs because bouncers or security have assumed that I'm not the manager. I've been thrown off festival stages by security who have allowed male counterparts that work for me to stay on stage because, again, I'm being assumed to be the groupie. I've gone to so many video shoots, I'm assumed to be a stylist or an extra. Again, I've toned down how I've dressed and how I've acted to kind of fit into kind of these roles that you say in order to be taken more seriously. And I think being taken really seriously in the industry is something that a lot of women really struggle with. So kind of touching on your data there with the AFAM research, I did a report earlier this year where we looked into kind of women that work in radio. And we interviewed over 100 women that work in radio as their main job across BBC, Bauer, Global, and the community stations. And 84% felt it's harder to be taken seriously and progress their career as women. And 70% felt that their appearance had an impact on their job opportunities. So these things are the reality of a lot of women in the industry that we have to kind of, uncover. So let's kind of move on to kind of talk about the next section, so what's wrong with the idea of imposter syndrome?
Yes, if I can get my slides to move on, let me skip through. Okay, so what's wrong with imposter syndrome? This very much follows the work of Jodie Bury and Rishika Talishan. And they have been doing research on this area for a while, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. But first of all, I just wanted to say, I don't know if Jude has joined us today. She said she might do. I just wanted to say thank you so much to Jude Thompson, who's the MD and founder of Indigo Talent, who posted on Facebook, gosh, a week ago, saying, oh my goodness me, Brené Brown has an amazing podcast on imposter syndrome. And when I listened to it, it was really very much spoke to all the themes that I wanted to talk to today. So I very much recommend pop over to Spotify and have a listen to this one, because it's really great. So thanks to Jude for that. But the Jodie and Rishika published an article in the Harvard Business Review in February of this year. So it's very recent. And what I really like about what they do is that they're Black critical scholars, and they position the experiences of Black and brown women and women of color in the center stage. So instead of saying things are tough for women in brackets and Black women have it even tougher, they are starting from the position of this is the reality for women of color, and it's likely to be true for other women as well. So I think that's a really powerful shifting and turning of the tables, because of course so much of this is intersectional. And so it's really important to say that. But what I'm doing here is using these ideas in a more general sense. So they published this article, and I believe it is the most accessed, most read, most downloaded Harvard Business Review article of all time. So that's enormous. They then published a follow-up article called I can't speak this evening, End Imposter Syndrome in Your Workplace. And that one is much more of tips and strategies for those who want to change the organization's culture. So for those of you who are in a position to shape structures and make systemic change, that's a great one to look at. So those are the two articles that I would thoroughly recommend that you read. And I think you can access 3 articles free of charge just by registering with HBR before you have to pay money to subscribe. So you're able to get those. So to answer your question, anyway, Nadia, the first thing that's wrong with imposter syndrome is it's become something that's pretty much, by and large, predominantly applied only to women. And it's not just women. The original researchers had to return to their data because they didn't find a significant difference between men and women's experiences of imposter syndrome. So it's the fact that it's become attached to women is, I think, because of this glass slipper thing, because you're a minority in a given situation, then you must be experiencing this, when actually feelings of self-doubt are completely normal. It was definitely, the original research didn't find a significant difference. Women don't suffer from this any more than men. The other thing was that this research that the imposter syndrome idea is based on was conducted in the late 1970s, and achievement and success at that time was very much defined in terms of white male American terms, progression up the career ladder, financial success, roles, various different indicators that we might now consider to be outdated. So it's actually about thinking about the conditions that this research was carried out in, and thinking, is this still applicable now, and is this helpful? The way that Rishika and Jodie Ann put it is that the environment question is missing. So there's a lot of focus on the individual, that there is something wrong with you as an individual because you feel you don't deserve your success, or you're a fraud, or there's you're going to be found out, rather than saying, actually, if you're in an environment where you're included, where you feel welcome, where you feel you belong, then you wouldn't have any of those feelings. So what we should be doing is flipping it and looking at the environment rather than the individual. And the fourth thing is, it's not a syndrome. Healthy self-doubt is totally normal. Before we went on air, I feel like we're on the telly, Nadia and I, we both said, we still feel like this now, years into our careers. It never goes away. It's about living with this stuff. And it's actually the environment that needs to change, and not us. And that's what I want to come back to later on. Because I'll just leave you with this thought. The only way not to feel like an imposter, actually, is to assimilate. And where does the diversity go if we do that? So that's not really desirable either. So those are sort of some of the things which are problematic about this idea of imposter syndrome.
Definitely. And I just wanted to touch on, just the relevance of all of this kind of conversation to the conversations that I've been having with various women in kind of boardroom discussions, and women putting themselves forward for board roles, just understanding that we are qualified already, that we are ready to go into those spaces. But we, in some organizations or some institutions, we're made to feel inadequate, or that we don't have the experience, or we don't have the business acumen. But that doesn't come from us, that comes from the environment of that organization, or the culture within that organization. And that's why when I have the conversations with various women, and it's been the same conversation with pretty much every woman over the last 18 months, talking about going into the positions, it's been that same conversation of, oh, am I ready? Am I qualified enough? Am I okay to be in this position? But it's about understanding that it's actually that organization that's making you feel uncomfortable and out of place to be there, but you are more than qualified to be there, and you have a point of view. Like you said, if you all just assimilate to be the same thing, where is the diversity? So how is there going to be any diversity of thought? How is there going to be any innovation? How is there going to be any progression? And just when I was doing some research as well, kind of looking into kind of ahead of our session, I found that AOC did a tweet a couple of days ago where she actually said exactly the same thing. She said, it's not imposter syndrome when institutions actually do treat you differently yet pretend that they don't. It's not imposter syndrome when institutions treat hardworking newcomers like invaders and normalize and accept incompetency from people that were used to being in power. And she just put out, everyone that is going through any of this in any workplace or any setting, that it's not fun, but it's real and it's not in your head. So I just wanted to say that before we kind of move on to the next thing. But so it sounds like feeling like an imposter is almost a good thing, because then that you're pushing boundaries in a way.
Yeah, yeah. I'll come to that. So I was just looking at the chat here, and Sylvia Montello and Kerry Harvey Piper, some women saying they're over 50 and over 60. It's really nice to see their perspectives as well, saying actually self-doubt is a much less unhealthy lens to see it through. And I think that's what I really wanted to get across, is that if you it's such an unpleasant term, isn't it? Imposter syndrome, like you've got something wrong with you. But yeah, I mean, it's all very well saying that, yes, right, okay, we need to feel like this and live with it, and this is a fact of life, but it's actually not very nice, is it? And it holds us back because we don't like this feeling. So the important thing here is very much, I can never get my little, there we go, slides to work again. It's not comfortable to push boundaries. It really isn't. And you just don't want to do that by yourself. This is why it's so important to have a really good support network. Certainly through doing In the Key of She, I've come up against you know, calling out some festivals for their lineups, posting things on Facebook and being quite public about what I'm doing, and getting some, you know, quite upsetting comments. And you know, I won't go into any detail. I'm sure everybody listening has had a very similar experiences, things that just make you feel really unpleasant. But what makes that bearable and what gives you the strength is sharing those experiences with your allies, with your groups, whether that's online or offline. But even more importantly, just believing that there is actually nothing wrong with us. You know, it's everyone else, to use a cliche. But I don't want to be too negative here, because what I hope to do also is to, you know, it's supposed to be inspiring, and also to give people some tools as to how they might deal with this. And there's a piece of work that I came across. It's in Appreciative Inquiry Practitioner, and it was published earlier this year. And my chat window is obscuring the author's names, David Shackett and Vivian Howe. I couldn't remember her name. And it's called The True Colours Phenomenon, Turning the Imposter Syndrome Upside Down. And there, if those of you that aren't familiar with appreciative inquiry, it is a technique where you, instead of focusing on the things that you lack, or in this case, you perceive you lack, you focus on the things that you already do well and that you're comfortable defining that you do well. Things that you're like, yeah, I'm proud of that. I've done that. I'm happy to accept that that is something I feel comfortable and confident about. And to start from a base of that and work up, rather than thinking, oh, I haven't done this and I'm not like that. And we'll look at some of your experiences in just a moment. So what they're suggesting is it's quite simple, really. You know, there's three original undesirable themes in imposter syndrome that are down the left-hand side. For those of you watching on a phone, I apologize because you won't be able to see this, but I'm sure I can send the slides around, Nadia. Would that be useful to do? Do that afterwards. And I think you can access this article as well. So, you know, not believing you deserve the success you've achieved is actually about finding elements of your past where you do feel that you deserve the success and the place that you have. Feeling fraudulent, listing down and actually doing a self-audit of all the things that you, that you do believe that, you know, the qualifications you have. And ultimately the evidence does speak for itself. Once you start doing this and you start listing things and saying, actually, oh yeah, I have achieved that and I have achieved that, you know, the evidence doesn't lie. It's a fact. You have to accept that after a while. Dread of being found out. Again, just move my chat window again. People will discover and be amazed that I am credible in this area if you start believing that. And these are more than affirmations. These are actually exercises that you can do to start thinking about yourself in a positive light that is authentic to your specific skills, rather than measuring yourself against, is that the right metaphor, against the glass slipper? But rather than saying, oh, the glass slipper doesn't fit me, diversity is all about our own qualities. So how do you actually sort of accentuate the positive, that feel better about yourself, to downplay those feelings of self-doubt? So there's various strategies that the authors suggest here. So, you know, when in the past were you able to grow into a role or a specific opportunity you were offered, even if that's a really small thing? You know, what was it that kept you going during that journey? How did you learn? Your present strengths and resources, what parts of your current work feel authentic to you? And what are your qualities or your credentials that feel aligned with who you are? What do you feel confident and grounded in? You know, start from the point where you do feel confident, rather than trying to start from lack. And then I rather like this one, the future, which is, suppose that while you sleep tonight, a miracle happens. Suddenly you transform into a sparkling version of yourself. What difference will you notice first when you wake up? And what would others notice? What would others notice? So those are just a couple of strategies for working on yourself. Having said that, it's the environment that needs to change, I'm also very much a pragmatist and a realist, because, you know, we can't do that overnight and we can't do that by ourselves. And we're going to have a look at some of the attendees' experiences here, you know, and it's it's easier said than done to say, well, everybody else needs to change. We do need to reframe how we think about ourselves as well. So yeah, so hopefully that's interesting.
Yeah, that's super interesting. We've had some comments come in from attendees as well. So Claire McPherson said that she did her CV recently and read through it thinking, gosh, I'm actually pretty good at what I do. And Debbie Green said that they're a coach, and when they're coaching clients, they get people to answer this question. I acknowledge myself for ... and list at least 20 things that they're super proud of and have achieved, and then identify unique skills and talents that have enabled you to achieve these acknowledgements. And Ali Purcell said as well that a good friend recommended to me years ago that you update your CV whenever you're having a tough time at work. It really does help boost confidence, even if you're not job hunting. So yeah, I love that. I think that's a really great practical exercise of how you can sit down and trying to reframe your thinking and think about the things and focus on the things that you are good at and the positive aspects to it.
Because just to come in on that, this is how we are going to shatter the glass slipper, is by doing things differently, and by recognizing what we bring and our unique talents that will be different to the way that the role has been molded. I say that with hesitancy because obviously that is easier said than done, but you can do it in little ways and by not changing the behavior. And again, there was another article a few years ago now on disruptive strategies and ways that you can just make a difference by just being yourself at work in different ways, which I understand is also a problematic concept for certainly for women of colour, because anyway, that's a whole different different seminar. But you know, we can make a bit of a difference by just the small things ourselves. So shall we have a look at the
Yeah, definitely. Just one second. I just wanted to say, just relating to the previous slide that you put up as well, just about, you know, speaking out and speaking to other groups and other people about the situation. And that's something that's really personally helped me, say with my journey with Women in Control, especially. You know, I started up Women in Control out of frustration with, you know, my experiences as a woman in the industry, but also looking at how other women were treated around me. And there was this culture of not really speaking or sharing experiences. And once I started doing panels and speaking to other women and talking about, well, this happened to me, or I get mistaken for a groupie, or I get mistaken for this. And the amount of women that said, I've gone through that exact same experience. And then realizing that actually it's not me, this is not acceptable, this behavior is not okay, allowed me to kind of overcome that and kind of reframe how I perceive myself and where I can see myself and where I should be, and kind of really help to kind of break that down. So it really helped me to kind of think about the qualities that I bring, I guess, and just kind of think about things in a different way. But yes, let's have a look
and ask other people. Ask someone you trust. What do I do well? What do I bring? And you'll be amazed. I had a wonderful boss at my last university who she just said, what we're going to miss is you. You know, you just have an innovative way, and you just walk into a room and you just make us all feel happy. And I think I nearly cried, you know, because I was like, oh, that's so nice. But I would never have listed that as a strength, because it's just who I am, you know. So yeah, ask other people for help as well, for advice.
Love that. Definitely. So yeah, let's have a look at the Padlet, which I've just pulled up. Can you see that okay on screen?
Yeah, it's quite small.
Oh, is it?
It's okay, I can read it. I don't know. I mean, if I just grab my chat window, I'll see whether, oh, that looks a little bit bigger.
Bigger.
Yeah. Can everybody see that okay? I mean, we're going to read some of these out. So it's really just sort of, there's loads on here, aren't there?
Okay, yeah, everyone can see that. But yeah, I saw this one, which stood out to me as well. I see men around me being promoted based on potential when women are being promoted based on performance. And definitely that's something that has been like proven in research as well. It's something that we discussed in our last session with Marianne Seacart, that in interviews as well, men are perceived to have the potential to do great things, and they are kind of hired on that basis, and then women are hired on the basis of kind of their previous performances, and then that all kind of feeds into how we feel about our CVs and how we feel about jobs that we apply for as well. Were there any that stood out to you?
Yeah, the one that really stood out to me was the one about being a diamond. and where I can't remember where that one's moved to now. Sorry, I've got varifocal glasses I'm peering through. There was one that said, I'm often being told
a few times by
yeah,
bosses that I'm a diamond in the rough. Is my roughness just because I'm working class? Will I ever be viewed as a diamond just as I am?
I found that really quite emotional, that one.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really powerful. I mean, I think it's a hard thing to say, but I think actually you don't want to be a diamond. You don't want to be polished in their image. You know, it's about being who you are, and actually accepting that one person's rough is another person's authentic and real. You know, but I also know that that's quite a glib thing to say, because you know you want to get ahead and be taken, let's say, taken seriously, but. Yeah, that's something I definitely resonate with in higher education, in some of the universities I've worked for, where you know, I don't feel I've had the right cultured education to do what I do, but you know, going back to what I was saying earlier about evidence, you know, I just have to look at, well, I've been a professor for 10 years, so I must be doing something right. And that's the trick, is to look at the evidence. So I'm just having a look here, feeling like I don't know every single answer. I will be seen as someone who shouldn't be there. Yeah, so a lot of this is pressure that we put on ourselves, because actually nobody knows all the answers, you know. Trying to resist urge to be self-effacing at all times. That's a really, and apologizing. That's the other thing. Very recently, I tried to start every email with sorry. So instead of saying, sorry, this is a bit late, or sorry, I've not included blah, blah, blah. It's just like, thanks for your patience. So sometimes I am genuinely sorry, but I was also once told by a colleague, when I was a PhD student, I had a habit of going up to do a presentation and basically saying, oh, this is going to be a bit rubbish. I'm not really sure of my ideas. And then absolutely wiping the floor, blowing everyone away and doing an amazing job. And a friend of mine came up afterwards, who was in his 60s. He's a Dutch guy, and he just said, why do you do that? It's really annoying. And I thought, yeah, actually, why do I do that? And I decided there and then, doesn't matter how I felt, I was not going to do that anymore. I wasn't going to stand up and say, oh, this is probably a bit rubbish, but and I think that's something that we tend to be guilty of, because we're not in a situation where we feel comfortable and welcomed a lot of the time.
Definitely. And then these two stood out to me as well. I never feel I have read enough or am well informed enough about stuff, and feeling like I have to be overly educated, overly qualified to be seen as a credible source, let alone be seen as someone who is great at what they do. Therefore, not labeling myself with the title I deserve, as I'm afraid others will question my level of expertise more harshly than my male counterparts. And yeah, I just wanted to kind of speak on my own experience as well, like putting myself forward as, you know, the chair for AIM is something, these are kind of the feelings that I had as well, just kind of even just getting into the boardroom and even kind of sitting around the board table for my first time. It was all these experiences, feeling like, do I know enough? Have I done enough research? Am I going to be seen as a credible source? But understanding that it's actually okay to go through that process, and everyone goes through that process. It sometimes takes around, 12 months to 12 months to 18 months to feel comfortable sitting on a board and being comfortable to be able to speak, depending on the kind of environment of the organization that you're in. But knowing that it's okay to go in and ask those questions, that it's okay to not know everything, that nobody around the table knows everything themselves as well. And just kind of having those feelings kind of feeding into the work that I was doing, as, wanting to put myself forward as the chair, thinking about, am I good enough? Should I go for this? Because I don't see any other women in these roles as well. So I think that one really kind of jumped out to me. And I saw a few as well that really related to kind of, being a manager in the industry as well, being seen as a cute girlfriend rather than an equal business partner. I also see a lot of that with, again, women struggling to be taken seriously. When I started managing other acts outside of just managing my first act, Lethal Bizzle, when I started managing other acts, people would assume that they were his artists as well, that I was working for his business, and I had to correct loads of people and say, no, it's my business, I'm the manager, I manage him, and I also now manage other artists, and just kind of getting people to understand that concept, that I'm actually an equal business partner, or run my own business within that time. And then somebody said they also had lost count of the number of times venues assumed that they're the girlfriend rather than the manager. So that is just a common experience that, you know, a lot of people across the industry have. And like you said, it touches into some of the in the key of she research that you've done with DJs as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think what you were saying there about those assumptions, that's the glass slipper in action. You know, it's like, well, it doesn't fit, you don't fit, because you don't look like what they're expecting you to look like. I just noticed here we've got a comment as well. As a trans woman, I have to work twice as hard as everyone else, and there's a massive lack of representation. Representation is absolutely vital. We are not going to change this glass slipper. You know, we're not going to change what these roles look like without representation. And I get really cross when people talk about, oh, well, you know, it doesn't matter, it's just a magazine, or it doesn't matter, and why do we need to have you know, politically correct representations? And that's the only way that things are going to change. It's such an important thing, and obviously trans women are an enormous part of that. I can't even begin to imagine the challenges and barriers that a trans woman faces in this space, actually.
Yeah, and somebody's put a comment in as well about resisting the urge to always be the mum, to look after everyone, and ending up always making the tea. And I think that's such an important one as well, because sometimes, you know, we feel just the pressure, or just by normality, to just kind of be like, oh, we'll be caring, or we'll just offer to make the tea. But then if you're doing that, you're kind of playing into those roles, and then does that feed into how you get taken less seriously? So I'm conscious of that. You know, I'm in a group right now where we're doing a project where it's everybody else is men. There's like there's 11 men and me in the whole project. But I find myself being the organizer sometimes, going, oh, I'll set up the Zoom link, and then I'm purposefully now not doing that, because I'm like, is it because I'm the woman that I'm expected to be the organizer that's always, it kind of feels like that's the making the tea role. Like if we were doing it in person, I'd be going, here, I've brought everybody drinks. But, you know, don't do those just, can you not feel just not being able to feel like a woman, like bringing those qualities and as a woman to still be able to be taken seriously within your job?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good example, because someone's here, Sophie's put here, we sometimes need to step out of our own way. I do think that is a really great way of putting it. We've got time for questions, haven't we, Nadia? Have there been questions in the Q&A box?
I've just answered two, actually. That was one of the questions that came in.
Ah, right. Okay, cool.
Yeah, we just had another one that's come in.
Healed. Oh, now I like that one. Which are uncomfortable and painful once you manage to get into them. That's a wonderful observation.
Let me read it out so that everybody in the session can.
Oh, sorry, I forgot that nobody else can see it. It's Jude McCardle.
Yes, so Jude said, is there a metaphor with the slipper being healed, which are uncomfortable and painful once you manage to get into them? And heels were originally worn by women for the pleasure of men, but now can be a symbol of female empowerment.
Wow. I don't have an answer to that, except that I'm totally going to take those ideas and run with them. Thank you, because I think that's a really excellent. She's put here in the chat. Or maybe I'm reading too much into it. Never. No. This is the beauty of these things. They help us understand what's going on in a way that's a simplified form that makes sense. You know, that's the power of metaphor and what's the other word? Oh, I can't think of it. But yeah, that's the power of these things. Analogy.
Yeah, there's another one I wanted to pull out, which was, I'm not somebody who likes confrontation, so I feel it'd be easier to conform, look, dress and act in a way that is considered to be acceptable rather than going against the grain. I have total admiration for others who stay true to themselves. I feel that this may come if I ever make it, but this is all very hypothetical. So I just want, yeah, again with that, I feel like, you know, so many women, I think within that radio report I shared, you know, 70%, I think it was, said that their appearance has an effect on their career progression and how they're taken seriously within their work. And I agree with whoever made this comment that, yeah, no, it is really, it's disappointing that I look back on my previous, like, you know, my experiences in my career, and that I did conform, that I did change how I dressed, because I was like, I used to wear high heels, I used to wear short skirts, and I didn't like the attention that I received, one, but secondly, I didn't like the way that I was constantly playing into those like unconscious bias kind of roles more by looking like what a girlfriend would look like. And I remember I did an interview on One Extra a couple of years ago, and I wore a baseball cap. I was really feeling unwell, actually, so I just went with the baseball cap and my glasses on, and I just spoke about some of my experiences being a woman in the industry, and they posted a clip up online, and it went viral. And I was talking about being a female manager and not being able to get into places, kind of being assumed to be all these different roles. And a lot of the comments came in and said, well, look at the way you're dressing. You don't dress like a manager, so therefore I'm not surprised you wouldn't get into a venue. You don't look like a manager because who wears a baseball cap? Why are you dressing like that? So you don't dress like a manager. So I think, you know, I think it is important that we allow people to know that it's okay to be true to yourself, and that it's, I think having this space to speak out about it, I think is really important, to be able to say, no, continue on to be yourself. And if anybody else is judging you for the way that you're dressing, then they're the ones that are in the wrong.
Yeah, definitely. And as I said, that, you know, there was lots of evidence in my data, and it was interesting because as people got more successful, they cared less, as you would expect. You know, when you've got more to lose and you're in that position where you don't feel able to change anything because you're, you know, you don't yet feel that you're in a position of power, it's very difficult to do those things. It's much, or the other way around, it's much easier to do those things when you're feeling much more secure, and that you're taking less of a risk. But I guess that this is why we need more minority identities in these positions, because that's how things get changed. Yeah, yes, and as Debbie says here, advocacy is key here too. Advocacy, but not being co-opted. The allyship is great until the allies actually are kind of, you know, speaking on your behalf. Yeah, so are there any other questions for Nadia or myself on this?
Yes, submit the questions in the Q&A box, and we'll come to those. There was one more I wanted to point out as well. There's so many good ones here. I just like relate to every single one, but it seems to me I have to work harder as a woman than men to get gigs and be taken seriously as a DJ, and have realized the way to get regular gigs is to run my own night, which I'm in the process of promoting now for next April. And I think this is a really interesting concept, or something that I've discovered by speaking to a lot of women in the Women in Control network and women across the industry who run their own businesses, that they've actually started up those businesses because they felt pushed out of the workplaces that they were working in, because they didn't feel appreciated. They didn't feel they could progress their careers. I'm true of that. I worked for a short time. I tried to work in a different company, and I was like, there's no progression for me here. I need to leave and start my own business, and that's the only way that I'm going to get paid what I'm deserved, and that's the only way I'm going to be getting taken seriously. So I found that both sad, but really also the reason why we have such incredible businesses that are run by women in the industry, because, you know, whoever has written this has said that now they're taking it into their own hands. They're saying, right, I can't get gigs, but let me go and start promoting my own shows and putting my own gigs on.
Yeah, that was definitely something that I heard a lot in the he or she interviews as well with producers, where DJs or wanted to produce and had decided, had been using, going to studios and using a producer or an engineer, and just had got so sick of having to second guess people's intentions, feeling unsafe, being hit on, you name it, you know, generally around safety, but also just that feeling of not being in control of your creative product and being patronized, that they then took that step to actually go and get skilled in production and be their own engineers and be their own producers. And it's extra work, but it's I agree with you, Nadia, it's kind of, it feels a bit like a double-edged sword, doesn't it? Because it's brilliantly empowering, but also extra work again, you know. Yeah, this Jude has also posted in the Q&A here about what advice would we give for someone working in a business where they don't feel able to change anything? Does that mean where the business doesn't feel able to change anything, or the individual.
I think Jude means that where you're working in a business where you don't think you'll be able to change.
You aren't able to change anything. I mean, my answer to that would be that you're always able to change how you react to things. You're always able to change your behavior, and you're always able to change how you relate to other people. And that over time, that should have an effect. You know, you just behave differently. I saw a wonderful comment in the chat ping up as it was whizzing past about we need more diamonds, we need more rough diamonds. You know, we shouldn't be polishing ourselves, we need more rough diamonds. I think that was Sylvia's comment that popped up. And it's the same sort of thing, you know, is that it's a case of just carrying on doing what you're doing. I totally hear you though, Jude, because within the QC, the thing I find really difficult is how do you speak to somebody who just actually doesn't care? Now that's a different issue. It's like, well, I don't care. I don't care if we don't have diversity. It's not important to me. It's not important to the company. I do what I have to comply with the law, and that's it. You know, I actually think that those kinds of people, you're never going to change them. Your effort and your energy needs to go towards people who are just unaware, you know, who've maybe never thought about these things. And that here Harvard Business Review article that was in July with suggestions on how to deal with it, how to eradicate imposter syndrome in your organization, has some quite nice ideas there about being data driven, being honest, really honest about the impact of bias in your organization, looking at who gets hired, changing the language that's used, various other strategies. So yeah, I mean, I guess ultimately it's about putting your energy where you think you might actually get some return. And if that means that the organization is not one you should be in, I mean, then maybe that's a bigger question, perhaps.
Yeah, and I think, I was going to say, I think it also is about us normalizing having these conversations, because, you know, I fall back on data because I think, you know, it helps us really tell the situation by having those facts kind of behind us. But, you know, we need to keep talking about it and normalize having these conversations as the reality outwardly into the industry. And I remember, Sam, we were on a session a few months ago and I related it to kind of drink driving, and I said that, you know, drink driving or didn't stop because, you know, people were embarrassed about it. It stopped because it became socially unacceptable. So we need to change the culture in the industry and make it socially unacceptable for women or minorities to go into any space and feel like this. And how do we do that? I mean, the first part is us talking about it and having this space to talk about it. And obviously, you know, it's not just the women that come to these sessions, but the second part is then actually kind of branching that out and having those conversations to the wider industry, you know, and that's how we start to action change. But we have to start normalize having these conversations, because this is the reality for so many of us. So, you know, that's the only way that we can really change it.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing is that we need to be having these conversations in forums that are much wider than you know, women's networks. And I know that there are men on the call today, and that's amazing. But we need to change. Everybody needs to be part of this conversation. It's not something that we should or can be doing by ourselves, because yeah, again, it's extra work. It's like a double treble shift on the minority, and this is the same for people of color or marginalized sexualities. It's not just gender. It's why is it always up to the oppressed to make to also do the extra work of educating others? I just wanted to pick up on Kerry Harvey Piper's made a nice question in the Q&A box here. Have either of you got any quick tips to use before I walk into a room of people I don't know, but that I need to network with without looking like I'm having palpitations or a hot flush? Breathing is my number one tip. Just calm and breathing and smiling and pretending you are on a stage. You are playing a role. This isn't you, you're playing a role. And if you think they're nice and they chat back with you, and then you'll relax, and that's what I do anyway. I just think, okay, I'm going on stage. What do you do, Nadia?
Yeah, similar. I've been doing, this thing recently where I've just been telling myself and speaking it out, saying, I'm really enjoying this. You're going to really enjoy this. And to try and enjoy those new experiences, because there are so many situations or challenges that I've been putting myself through that have been the first time I've done anything. Like on Friday, I had to go up and give a speech on stage, and I was right at the end. And I felt nervous the whole way through, and I had to listen to everybody's speeches and go, oh, is my speech good enough? Is what am I saying? And then I had to go, no, just take your moment and enjoy it, because otherwise you're just going to miss out on all the opportunities and the experiences in life. And I find that when I've been saying that to myself, it really helps me just to say, like, physically speak it out and say, you're going to enjoy this, you're going to have a great time, you're going to really enjoy this, and just go in and kind of, I think, like what you said, the upside down approach, like approaching it and taking it from the positive side. I think it really, really does help. But we need to be having more of these conversations, because the fact that there's just been so many of these posts that have been made on this Padlet, and we're all feeling similar things, it shows that it's normal to feel this way. And there's nothing wrong with you. And I want to, I'll stop sharing because we've got a couple more minutes left, so I can kind of see everybody a bit clearer. But I just wanted to relate it again back to, how we can, use this thinking in the boardroom as well, just to make sure that that you are adequate already, that you are already experienced. And I think me and you, when we were planning this session, a few months ago, we were talking about this kind of being a Trojan horse session as well. Yeah, like come in and learn about how you can beat imposter syndrome. But the answer is, like, you're already good enough. You're already there, and just understanding that it's your experiences, it's your perspective, everything that you bring is value that is added to the conversation, to the business, and you are increasing the diversity in the business, and you're increasing the innovation, and you're increasing everything. So just like, you're good enough already, and just realizing that, I think, is the main thing that I want to bring from this whole kind of board program, to say that you don't need to question yourself, am I good enough? Just your experiences and perspectives are unique, and that's what's needed. We need unique and perspective voices around the table, because representation is important. But how can an organization be representative if it doesn't have those diverse voices or experiences around the table? So whatever your experiences are, it's relevant, and feel comfortable to speak it out, because it's other people have gone through the same thing, and you speaking out actually will help other people, but it will also help you on your journey.
Yeah, I have nothing to add to that. Absolutely. And also showing, actually I lied, I have a small thing, showing your vulnerability. If you just say, do you know what, I've not thought about that before, or I don't know the answer to that, but isn't that an interesting question? You will watch I've seen this, I've done it myself, and you watch the number of people that go, oh, or if you dare to say, excuse me, I don't understand that, or could you explain that? And then the number of people that would just say, oh, thanks for asking that. I didn't know either. You're sitting there thinking you're the only one, and they're sitting there thinking they're the only one. So we need to sort of drop our guards a lot more in these situations, I think.
Oh, this has been such a great session. Thank you so much to everybody that's
Nadia.
us and has been so interactive, and it's just been like feeling like we're having a conversation with all of us in the room. It's been great. And Professor Sam Warren, thank you so much. You're incredible.
Oh, thanks. You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
No, it's been great to have you. Thank you. Yeah, all the comments coming in. Thanks so much from Sylvia, from Helen, from Kerry. Yeah, we appreciate all of you joining us, and we're happy that it was useful and we got something out of it. So the recording for this will go out tomorrow. Sam has said that she'll kindly send the slides, so I'll make sure that that goes out too, and I'll also send the previous 2 recordings out from the previous session. So the next session is going to be on the 23rd of November, and that's going to be about the power of women, and we're going to be talking about women in leadership roles. And then really excitingly, we're going to be doing an in-person session at the beginning of December, which is our first in-person session since the whole pandemic, which is going to be held at the PPL offices. So I'll be announcing that information soon on when you can sign up to that. I'm not sure what our capacity is, so I'll get all the information for that together and let everybody know. But what I'm hoping for that to be is a real kind of networking session as well, because like I said, I would like to kind of reach behind the Zoom and kind of talk to the people that are in the session with us. So I can't wait to meet you all. So thank you so much for joining us all.
Yes, thank you, everybody. Thank you for giving up your evening. I hope it's been worthwhile.
Amazing. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.